An unexpected car accident in Orlando can leave people grappling with pain, confusion, and financial burdens. The question on many folks' minds after a car accident is this: what is my car accident case worth? And this is a critical question. Understanding the value of your claim is pivotal in getting the money you're entitled to after getting injured by a careless or negligent driver. It can help you make a decision to turn down a lowball offer. It's also important because if you know the real value of your car accident, you won't think you're dealing with a lottery card. The truth is that there's a lot of billboards and advertisements out there that convince people a fender bender is worth $1 million. And these advertisements work against injured people because juries are convinced folks are out for a windfall if they're bringing a personal injury claim. When in reality, most folks are just looking to get their medical bills back and get paid for their lost wages and missed work, as well as other costs like pain and suffering when they got hurt by a careless or reckless driver. So in trial, the way this plays out is a lot of jurors and potential jurors are sitting there thinking, this person isn't hurt, they just want to make a boatload of money. So it's important that we talk about how cases are valued so that folks have a good understanding of what they're dealing with in the aftermath of a car accident. In this video, we'll talk about the types of damages available and the factors we look at to properly value a case. That way, you can begin to think about your case and get a firm grasp of what kind of value you can expect when it comes time to resolve your case. So let's start out by talking about two broad categories of damages: economic damages and non-economic damages. Economic damages are damages that can be added up definitively. These are tangible damages, and some examples of economic damages are medical bills and lost wages. Essentially, we're looking at any costs associated with your injuries that have a dollar value assigned. Your medical bills will have a definite value. And in the same way, the work you missed will have a definite value, and you can prove it with pay stubs. Now, let's talk about non-economic damages. These damages are not so easy to calculate because they're intangible. Some examples of non-economic damages are things like pain and suffering, emotional distress, PTSD, physical disfigurement, and loss of enjoyment of life. Now, another type of damages that we'll briefly cover are punitive damages. These damages are not intended to compensate the plaintiff for losses. Instead, they're intended to punish a defendant for especially egregious and reckless behavior. For example, in a car accident or a truck accident, you may be able to pursue punitive damages if you were injured by a drunk driver. Now that we've talked about the different types of damages in an Orlando car accident case, let's talk about factors we use to determine the value of a case. Let's start out by talking about the insurance policy. Unless you're injured by someone with a ton of money and assets, the value of your case will likely be limited by the insurance coverage available. In cases involving commercial vehicles, you may have access to a lot larger insurance policy. However, if your case involves just another driver, there may only be a little bit of insurance coverage available from that driver's policy. Now in Florida, which is a no-fault state, drivers are not required to carry bodily injury liability coverage. However, many drivers are still carrying $10,000, $25,000, or $50,000 policies, and some are carrying much more. Now, even if the at-fault driver's policy is small, you may have uninsured motorist coverage on your own insurance policy, which could potentially cover your damages that exceed the at-fault driver's coverage. Another major factor that determines the value of your case is the severity of your injuries. Cases with big value usually involve very serious injuries. And the more severe the injuries, the higher the medical bills, and the higher the value of the claim. What you don't see when you see a big case value advertised on a billboard or in a commercial is that the medical records of that person involved would show you that they were hurt really bad. And you don't get to see what their life was like before and after the accident. Overall, you can be sure that a case with serious value involved serious injuries. The insurance adjusters and the jury will get to see the medical records. Additionally, the jury will get to see how a person's life has been affected by their injuries. Thus, if injuries aren't severe, a plaintiff is going to have a hard time justifying a giant number in their case. After all, the goal in a personal injury case is not to make a person rich. It's to compensate an injured person for their losses. And each loss must be justified. And a jury full of hardworking people must believe those damages are justified. Nonetheless, a jury may be open to awarding big damages in a case where the defendant presents poorly and gives a bad impression. For example, if the defendant can be shown to be a liar, or if the defendant appears slippery or sleazy, the jury may decide to award higher damages. Ultimately, the fate of the plaintiff is in their hands, and that's something to keep in mind when trying to come up with a value for a car accident case. In addition to considering medical bills, we also have to look at future medical care. For example, if a person is injured by a negligent or reckless driver and suffers injuries that will require years of rehab and future medical care, we have to consider those damages as well. Oftentimes, we will use a life care planner or a similar expert to help us come up with an accurate value for the future medical care a person will need. That way, we have a good solid number we can use in negotiations and at trial. So, we've talked about how insurance coverage and the severity of injuries can determine the value of a case. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we might put a value on the effect a person's injuries have had on their lives. For example, a person who suffers a permanent disability will experience losses that go far beyond just the injuries themselves. People with these types of injuries often suffer tremendously, and their lives are never the same after they get hurt. They may not be able to advance in their careers. They may not be able to exercise or play sports that they played before their injuries. And they may not be able to hold their child or grandchild ever again. There's value in all these types of losses. After all, these folks never asked for this to happen to them. And they're entitled to damages for what they've gone through and what they will go through. Ultimately, they have to shoulder the costs, or the reckless driver's insurance company does. So, in this video, we've talked about insurance coverage. We've talked about the severity of a person's injuries. And we've talked about the effect a person's injuries have had on their life. These are some of the key factors in determining the value of a car accident case. When you consider the severity of your injuries and the effect those injuries have had on your life, try to step into the shoes of a juror. That's a person with no personal experience with your injuries. And they're going to see the evidence that you bring to trial. If you can understand how a juror will see your injuries, you can get a feeling for how the insurance company will value your claim, because the insurance company is considering the risk of going to trial when they're considering how much money to pay you. Well, that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions for us, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to give you a free legal consultation and talk with you about whatever happened. You can reach us at the number below in the video description, or you can find us at www.carelessdriver.com. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll see you next time.